challenge with summer events.
And we did get word after we'd already scheduled the event that we conflict with an event at Pioneer Town tonight, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is that 100 years of dairy or something?
And you were in the time.
Yeah, so Sarah had agreed, and that's why we are changing to
Tuesday nights, okay. So, Marianne will inform you on all of that. I'm Deborah, I'm the director of the Art Center, so I want to welcome two people who I haven't seen before, and Ben, and thank Phil Berghauser does the video of a lot of our presentations that then are available on our YouTube channel. So if you know somebody who would have enjoyed the program but couldn't make it, you can let them know that, Phil, within a couple of weeks it'll be up on our YouTube channel. Hi, welcome. We're just giving some information. So a couple things. This is a by donation event, and you are not obligated to donate, but the suggested donation is $10, and there's a donation box right when you go in and out. It was when you passed it on your way in. So what we use that monies for is it goes into a separate account that is only used for these presentations, Voices of the Western Slope. So it helps us, I don't know if Ben needed travel money or anything, but we have had people come from further away who needed honorarium or travel money or those types of things. So it's to help us get better programming or more programming from a broader geographic area on the Western Slope that could come here to speak. So that's what those donations are for. The other thing is, if you are wanting to be on an email list to know what goes on at the Art Center, you can let me know and I can put you on the email list. All you hear about from us, and I know that Rick and Lynn are on our list, we don't barrage you with anything but what's happening. It's just to keep people informed of what's going on here. I'll say a quick thing. Tomorrow we are hosting a new artist, or doing a reception for a new artist in our gallery, 3 to 5. He's a local gentleman from Delta who's been a watercolor artist for a long time. We pretty much only have local artists. And then there's live music happy hour in our parking lot every Friday through September 3rd. So that's what I have to inform you about the Art Center. Marianne's going to tell you about Ben, who we're very grateful is here. And I will chime in that I'm very excited about our upcoming speaker in September, and she'll talk to you about that.
Great, thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Marianne.
So my name is Marianne. I'm from Delta County Libraries. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight for Voices of the Western Slope. This is, as Deb said, a joint partnership between the Grand Mesa Art Center and the Delta County Libraries. Before we get to tonight's presentation, I do want to highlight the next one that Deb mentioned briefly, which is going to be in September, the second Tuesday in September.
September 14th.
September 14th. And we're going to have Ruth Pettigrew, who is a local multimedia artist and art history educator. Ruth's presentation is called You Can Buy It, But You Can't Own It. And she's going to use slides and examples from art history to talk about how a work of art, which is something we can buy if we have the money, is an artifact of something which we cannot own, an elusive moment in time and part of the artist's creative process. So we're very happy to have Ruth presenting for us, and we hope to see our art-loving community in attendance for that event in September. I'd also like to encourage you to visit your local library. If you haven't signed up for a library card, absolutely, we'd love to sign people up. You can visit our website or call us for our hours and the locations of the 5 libraries. All right, so tonight we're very pleased to have Ben Katz, who's from the Public Lands, who is the Public Lands Program Director at the Western Slope Conservation Center. The Western Slope Conservation Center was founded in 1977 represents over 500 members who advocate for public lands, watershed stewardship, and environmental education on the Western Slope. After earning his degree in environmental science, Ben became interested in public lands while working as a wilderness ranger in the Weminuche, am I saying it right? Weminuche Wilderness in San Juan National Forest. As Public Lands Program Director, he's excited to pass along his love of public lands to the communities of the Lower Gunnison watershed, which is us. All right, Ben, take it away.
Sure. Well, thanks everyone for being here. And thank you Delta County Libraries and Grand Mesa Arts and Event Center for hosting me. So yeah, my name is Ben Katz. I'm the Public Lands Program Director for the Western Slope Conservation Center. The Western Slope Conservation Center, or WSCC, builds an active and aware community to protect and enhance the lands, air, water, and wildlife of the Lower Gunnison watershed. The Lower Gunnison watershed, as we define it, kind of goes north to McClure, out to past Cedar Ridge and out a little past Delta, and then south to about Montrose, and then kind of follows the topography all the way back up. So that's a little bit about our area of interest. A little bit about me. As Marianne said, I was a wilderness ranger not only in San Juan National Forest, but also in Sierra National Forest in California, working in the John Muir Wilderness. I spent a third summer with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a wilderness fellow, writing baseline wilderness character monitoring reports for two fish and wildlife refuges, one in Alaska and one in Nebraska. And then since then, I lived in Denver for about 6 years, working in the environmental world, mostly doing water quality in a water quality lab, and then also working on construction sites as a stormwater and erosion control inspector. And then I found myself in Paonia, working for Western Slope Conservation Center about a little over 2 years ago. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be in Cedar Ridge this evening. And again, thank you all for joining us. As Public Lands Program Director, I like to say I have kind of two columns. The first is advocacy, so we pay attention to local, regional, and federal land management planning processes and advocate for protections and for conservation in those processes. And we try and extend information and education to our members. And I also have a stewardship column, which I'll get to a little bit here tonight, which focuses on getting people out on the land. So trail work, hikes, we've actually had a series of events where we've removed big elk fencing from old orchards to open up some habitat for those species. So that's a little bit about what I do. And throughout this whole presentation, if you guys have questions, please ask them. I focus mostly on federal public lands. There's also a whole another realm that's kind of state public lands, like our state parks and state wildlife areas and that sort of thing. So yeah, again, really excited to be here. So what are our public lands? Does anyone have any? Yeah.
Federally owned lands or state.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they're federally or state-owned lands that we all collectively own. And I have this definition up here from the Wilderness Society, but areas of land and water that today are owned collectively by U.S. citizens and managed by government agencies. So again, this evening I'll be talking mostly about federal public lands and those agencies who manage them, but there is a level state and even town lands, town parks. Those are all public lands as well that we can all use. So I wanted to get in really briefly to kind of who manages our public land. The National Park Service, which most of you might be familiar, and I'm from the East Coast, so this is usually the first one I go to because everyone knows our national parks, but the others especially on the East Coast, are a little bit more difficult to conceptualize. But then we've got the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is mostly our wildlife refuges, and the Bureau of Land Management. And again, there are some public lands, more in Utah, that are managed by tribal governments as well. Monument Valley is a really good example of that, managed by a tribal government there. So how are our public lands managed? And they're managed in different sections. They have different land designations. And I probably won't get to all of them here tonight because there are a lot, but I picked kind of the highlights. So again, the national parks are managed by the National Park Service. Our national forests and grasslands are managed by U.S. Forest Service. National wildlife refuges are managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then our national conservation lands are managed by BLM. And the BLM, I will add, also manages lands. You know, all of these, well, I guess really the BLM also manages lands that aren't specifically in national conservation areas, but that's what they're most known for. And then there are several designations that can be managed by several different agencies, sometimes collectively, sometimes separately, but National Monuments is a really good example where each agency, Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, BLM, and Forest Service can all have be managing a national monument. National Scenic and Historic Trails, again, are a designation that many agencies can manage. Wild and Scenic Rivers, National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, BLM, and Forest Service. And then also wilderness can be found in national parks, Fish and Wildlife Service refuges, on BLM lands, and on national forests. So I figured I would put up a few pictures and see if anyone can name where they are. This one's probably more obvious for most of you who've been around here for a while. Anyone know Black Canyon? Nice, managed by National Park Service. Yep, Island Lake, managed is in Grand Mesa National Forest and managed by the U.S. Forest Service. And then maybe a little harder to see, but
Pleasure Park?
Close. It's the McCarty Bench Trail, Dominguez Escalante National Conservation Area, just west of Delta, and that's managed by the BLM. And one more. Yeah. Yeah, I think I heard it. Crag Crest Trail, which is a national scenic trail managed within Grand Mesa National Forest, and again managed by the U.S. Forest Service. So this is a good example where there could be a national scenic or a national recreation trail in a national park, in a national conservation area, and that would be managed by the respective agencies. So now that you have a general idea of who manages what, and each come with their own set of different regulations and management structure, how do we do it responsibly so that they're around for future generations, so that same experience you have on the Crag Crest Trail can be the one that your kids have or your neighbors? Anyone have any ideas?
Leave no trace.
Yeah.
Pack it in, pack it out.
You got it. So yeah, I wanted to touch on the leave no trace principles. I've been doing a lot of training around this at WSCC this year. We've got a crew of trail ambassadors who are going out into our wilderness areas and teaching people about leave no trace and precisely what to do when you're faced with, when you're hiking, and how to do those things responsibly. And what has been apparent to me is that people have a general idea of what leave no trace is and maybe know the principles, but don't know all of everything that they should do, or they're faced with a situation in the woods or on your public lands where you where you don't know what to do. So the first one is plan ahead and prepare. This one's pretty straightforward. It happens before you get to the trailhead. Usually researching where you're going to go, right? Is there a fire van? Is the trail open? Can my car make it to the trail? How far am I going to hike today? Do I have enough water? All of that sort of thing goes into this plan ahead and prepare. And without it, you can find yourself in precarious situations. I also volunteer on the West South Mountain Rescue, our local search and rescue. I don't think it's the search and rescue for Cedar Edge, but it might be. We just merged with the Delta Search and Rescue team, so I believe we're going to be coming up here a little more often. But planning ahead and preparing are crucial to having us not have to go and find it. So yeah, I think I hit all of these. Know the regulations, prepare for extreme weather. Especially around here, really want to make sure you get below tree line before 2 o'clock or so, especially in the summer with the summer storms. When they happen. Schedule your trip too. Visit in small groups and repackage food to minimize waste, and also use a map and a compass or your phone if you can charge it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is it about getting below tree line before 2 p.m.?
Yeah, I found this in the John Muir Wilderness in particular, where we'd have a lot of people hiking 14ers and things like that, and usually during the monsoonal season, there's even a light storm that seems light or even non-existent kind of in town, can kind of sweep through really quickly. Lightning strikes, heavy wind, things like that if you're below tree line, you can kind of avoid those weather patterns and kind of make it out relatively safely. I've been on the Continental Divide when a storm was coming in, and you can literally see the hair raising off of your arms, and the electric from lightning forming. So it can be scary, but that was kind of what I would generally tell people to do. I was camped out in Chicago Basin. If anyone has been down there, it's a basin. You can take the Narrow Gauge Trail or the Narrow Gauge Railroad, and we get dropped off, and then you're about 7 miles from the basin. There are 3 14ers and 1 13er there, so it's a really high use area, and we would just sit right at the trail going up to all the 14ers, and it's more of a recommendation. People can obviously make their own choices, but we'd recommend that people kind of stayed off the high peaks in the afternoon. So, yeah. But again, it's this summer is a little different. We're seeing kind of some less weather than normal. Certainly, that was almost 10 years ago at this point that I was a wilderness ranger down there. So, yeah. Any other questions, too? Cool. Travel and camp on durable surfaces is principle number 2. So in popular areas, really want to concentrate use on existing trails and campsites, areas where the trail already exists. In this situation here in the picture, you can see that there are kind of two trails walking in the same direction. This is usually called trail braiding a lot of the time. Usually it's caused when an area of trail is pretty wet and people don't want to walk through it, so they kind of walk next to it. And what ends up happening is they end up creating a second trail kind of off to the side and causing some resource damage. One thing that Leave No Trace recommends is that you camp 200 feet from the trail and also from water sources. From water is mainly to protect wildlife. Wildlife like to go drink in the early morning and the early evening, and if you're camped right there, they're going to avoid those areas. And then camping 200 feet from the trail will let other visitors kind of have a wilderness or a wild experience without seeing your tent. So that's a big one to remember, and 200 feet is further than I always think it is. I always underestimate and then I have to pace off, but it's roughly, can't remember what my pace is, it's like 35 steps for me. Normal steps is about 100 feet, so ends up being quite a lot. And then in pristine areas, it's actually a little bit of the opposite. If you're in a group, you want to disperse your use so that you don't end up hiking and creating more damage than happens after with just one person. So think of like walking through a meadow, and then if 3 other people kind of follow you, all of a sudden that whole area is kind of packed down, and then it causes some damage there. And also avoiding places where impacts are just beginning. So if you kind of see an area where some impact is starting to happen, then avoiding that area. Number 3, dispose of waste properly. The easiest one here is to remember is pack it in, pack it out. So any trash or materials you bring in with you, you want to make sure you carry them out with you as well. That includes toilet paper and hygiene products, dog waste and dog poop. You want to pack out with you as well. I usually just bring like an Nalgene that I put my bags of my dog's waste in. And then another big one that people seem to forget is burying your solid human waste. And it's usually, you want to try and go 6 to 8 inches deep into the ground. And we're seeing this a lot at higher use areas, people not knowing how deep to bury their waste, and then you end up kind of walking up to a campsite or something like that, and there's toilet paper scattered all over, and it's really doesn't smell good there, and it's just a mess. So that was a big part of my wilderness ranger work too, is just kind of burying human waste, which wasn't fun.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I understand that dog waste doesn't, I'm going to say degrade, like deer and elk or other animals that would just live before. Is that true? Because they eat different stuff.
Yeah.
Dogs eat different stuff.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I like to think of it like if the deer and bears and other animals that are out there, they're eating, it's part of the life cycle of a plant, right? As it gets churned up in their stomach and then ends up becoming fertilizer after they've passed it. And dog waste, to me, is just picking up after, it's just an unnatural addition, and not something that's naturally there, usually.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, 'cause I think a lot of people think, well, it's just like bear poop or deer poop or whatever, but that it actually is different because they eat, dog food and stuff that's made out of different stuff. So I just wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but good question, because that's another one. Those of you who've hiked in busy areas see even people leaving dog bags and then forgetting where they are and stuff like that. So.
Who's going to pick it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of getting rid of waste. Minimize campfire impacts, and again, this one, if people are paying attention, it might not be too pertinent this summer because we're in a fire ban now, at least in the Gmug National Forest in Delta County. But when you can have a fire, you want to make sure it's not too big. You're using established fire rings. One of the things I would do often in my work as a wilderness ranger was just, there would be campsites with 4 or 5 different fire rings because everyone wants to build your own once you're camped there, and trying to just kind of minimize that impact. So we would end up scattering all but one usually. And then keeping fires small, and a good rule of thumb is to not burn anything bigger than your forearm, and usually only dead and downed, so not cutting anything off of a tree. But if a tree has died already and it's fallen down, using that, and then also making sure you burn everything all the way down to ash, and then putting it out completely, just so we don't I think this stat is like 90% of forest fires are human caused, so just trying to prevent that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me, my understanding was that 90% were lightning caused, and that humans were actually played a small part of that.
You know, we just did a training with the Forest Service maybe a month ago, and that was their statistic, so.
I'll have to check that, thank you.
Yeah. You know, the big one down in the Uncompahgre Wilderness, the Cow Creek fire last year was human caused, and that, yeah. But I don't know, that's maybe something good that I will check as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's certainly, yeah.
I would add that I think historically, the gentleman's statistic is probably correct,
Okay.
but it's then, I think now we're talking about more recent years and climate change, and more of them are human caused now
Okay.
because of the dryness.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, a good question. The next principle, respect wildlife. I like this little visual aid. You know, about 50 yards from elk and deer, and about 100 from a bear. You know, and observe wildlife from a distance, and never feed animals, because then they'll kind of get the taste for human food and want to go find more. And that's specific to bears. I know that's a big issue. And along with that, storing your food properly. I always have a bear can, something that a bear can't get into, and I'm sure they sell them around. But you can also hang your food if you know the proper way to do that. It's usually 12 feet up, and then on a tree about 8 feet from the trunk. So it can be kind of hard to do depending on where you're camping. And then the big one here that I see a lot when I'm hiking is controlling pets in our wilderness areas in the West Elks and the Raggeds, and up on Grand Mesa. You know, dogs are kind of running off leash all around, which is certainly allowed. But what can happen is they scare wildlife. If the wildlife is bedded and then has to stand up and run away because of a dog, then it can cause a lot of stress to that animal, and also cause a lot of stress, and it's cause it to just have a tougher time calving, have a tougher time just surviving. So, yeah.
Just one more point on food. Cliff Jacobs, an outdoors person from northern Minnesota, recommends stashing food away from camp. Just because if you're going to hang it or do what, keep it away from camp, because the bears typically will wander through camp, but if there's nothing there, they aren't used to, they're critters of habit, and they aren't used to randomly stumbling on food.
Yeah, that's a great point. We used to say the rule of thumb was the kitchen was about 100 feet from your tent, and then where you stored your food was another 100 feet away, so it's kind of like a triangle. And I actually, just to share a quick story, when I was in Sierra National Forest, we had seen a bear on the trail, and there were 3 of us, and we all had shovels, and we kind of scared it off. And then we camped a little bit down the trail. And because we'd seen the bear, we were extra cautious to eat very far. We set up our tents, and then we moved all of our food way far away. And when I got back to my tent, it was laying on the ground, and a bear had ripped through it, and I had left a small bottle. All that was in my tent was my sleeping pad, my sleeping bag, and my backpack, which is empty except for a small bottle of unscented Purell and my GPS unit. I actually took a bite out of the GPS unit and then took a bite out of the Purell bottle. So I ended up having to camp for 7 days without a tent after that. It wasn't too fun, and a little scared that night too, because by the time we finished everything up, it was all dark and thought my tent had fallen over. But when I tried to put it back up, all the poles were snapped and stuff. So yeah, just word to the wise, I guess. make sure that you've got everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, especially this last point, avoiding wildlife during sensitive times. You'll notice on state wildlife areas around here in particular, they have a timing, or they have a seasonal closure. That's usually for either big game, usually elk and mule deer, to migrate, or for them to calve and raise young, or have kind of critical winter area that's kind of undisturbed. So certainly respecting that.
Question.
Yeah.
What about controlling children?
Yeah.
It's more difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
that are not your own, other people's that are doing, walking on fragile soil,
Sure.
they don't know.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, so what do you do?
Well, there's a thing in Leave No Trace called the authority of the resource. That's where I think an example that I would use, where just trying to educate the kids on the damage that they're doing, because I'm sure to them, like you said, they don't know that it's fragile habitat or something like that.
That's if you really have your own children, but if it's somebody else's child, do you have any recourse to stop them?
I think as a citizen, probably not. If you could certainly alert the Forest Service or the Park Service, or who's ever managing the land that you're in, about the issue. And you can mention it to the parents, and I wouldn't say it in a mean way, but
No.
just know that it's
Generally, yeah.
causing some damage, and you've been,
Not
like to
what
see
they
things
see.
wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. No other recourse, though, I don't
No.
want to hurt a kid.
No, that's, and again, if you're interested, we do run a trail ambassador program with the Forest Service, where they'll come in and kind of teach volunteers on how to be trail ambassadors, and then can go out on the trail, and we usually give people a Forest Service t-shirt and a hat, and we just try and educate people certainly on that type of thing, right? Because many people likely don't know that it's an issue. But yeah, I think that's a tough one too, especially when someone else's child. So.
Well, is there any effort made on for the people managing the land, when there's a huge influx of public coming in from other states, or that maybe don't have the knowledge as adults? Is there some brochure they give them?
Yeah.
The national parks?
Well, the national parks do have a brochure you get as you go in.
Yeah.
What I've been working on for other, specifically national forest land, but it could be for BLM land as well, is actually redoing the trail kiosks and making sure that all that information is on there. Because usually one of the first things people do when they go to a trail is they go and look at the kiosk and the map, and a lot of people haven't planned ahead, so they have to take a picture of the map to know where they're hiking and things like that. But if we can, what I've tried to do is put that information and these Leave No Trace principles, some key stuff right on the kiosk itself. So you can always refer them to that too. But it's a tough position with someone else as just kind of a citizen, community member going in and hiking. So, but good question. The next one is leave what you find. I see this a lot on, areas with Aspen. People like to carve their initials in the date in, and I've seen really old ones at this point, and they never really go away. But the idea is that finding an antler or like a fossil or something on the ground is really cool, and you want other people to experience that in the same way that you did when you found it and held it in your hand. So that's something that we really try and tell people is this can be cool to grab a rock or a fossil or an antler and kind of hang onto it, but maybe let someone else find it and pick it up. And you can always take a picture, show people that you found this really cool thing, and then kind of put it back down. And then another one here is just trying to avoid introducing and transporting non-native species, because those can really cause damage in areas. I mean, it's hard to even get rid of them in a yard where you're kind of constantly managing it, but in areas that it's kind of less, more wild, can really run free. So. And then the last one I've got is this be considerate to others. I like to think, do you have a question?
Oh, in terms of number 4 and the last, does that apply to Karens?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Karens, some people will build them for trails. I usually, if I'm on a trail and I see a Karen, I usually kick it over because it kind of annoys me when I see them, but I think if I need them to find my own way, I'll keep them up. A lot of people like building huge ones or different rock art things, and for me that's just a different experience than I like to have in the woods, especially if it's right on kind of a made trail, you know exactly where you're going, don't need it for navigation. So yeah, I would say so.
Well, especially in wilderness, where you're concerned about braiding trails, moments of
Yeah.
sacrifice and so on.
Yeah, definitely. And there are some parts of Utah and like certainly in the high country where the trail is just kind of on rocks, right? And you don't really, there's no trail to follow, and that's where especially up 14ers and things like that. That's where Karens can be really helpful. At this point, I feel like the land management agency usually puts them up where they think they're necessary. So, but can be helpful, I think, for navigation, but less so. Just be like, I made it to this spot, and I'm going to build this big rock structure. But yeah, another good question. And then I think this is the last one. Be considerate to others. I really dislike when I'm hiking and I hear someone blasting music on a speaker right in front of me. It really ruins my experience. And so, really this number one is just for the respect for other visitors and protecting the quality of their experience, I think is really key here. I think especially on a long backpacking trip, we used to do 9-day trips with the Forest Service, and at a certain point, day 6 or something, we'd be making dinner. It'd be nice to have a little music, but just kind of keep it quiet and at camp and making sure that no one else can really hear. And then around here as well, see a lot of pack horses, usually just yielding to them, letting them kind of walk on the trail and stepping to the side if you're hiking or mountain biking or something like that, because horses can get spooked pretty easily. So yeah,
What's
just kind
the rule of the road for mountain bikes if you're hiking?
of.
You have to yield to them?
Yes, I think it's the same as if you were hiking. So if they're going uphill and you're going downhill, then you yield to them. But I do believe they should yield to you if you're hiking up, although and they're coming down. Although if they're coming at a pretty high rate of speed, might be kind of tough. So yeah, I would usually, if I were hiking, I would usually yield to the mountain bikers because they also kind of bother me sometimes and want them to get kind of past me. So, but they're also going to be probably a little bit quicker than hiking. So, but good question.
And what was that? So if 2 people are hiking and downhill, who yields to whom if they're all hiking?
Usually the downhill hiker will yield to the uphill hiker.
Okay.
Yeah. But sometimes people hiking uphill need a break too. So,
Sure.
yeah. And that's Leave No Trace in a nutshell. You can get really deep into this, and their whole trainer courses to get you become a master educator, and people do this for a living, just walking, traveling from state to state, teaching, leave no trace. But so now that you know what the public land agencies are and where they manage, and also how to be responsible hikers or mountain bikers or recreators, I just wanted to mention some upcoming events that WSCC has. So we lead a hike series all throughout the Lower Gunnison. This is all volunteer-led, so each hike is led by volunteers. So if you're interested in leading hikes around here, please let me know. I'll be around. It was really, the Mike Cycle program was really started by a member of ours coming to us about 4 years ago and saying, I'm new to the area, I like to go on hikes, and I don't know anyone, so can I lead these for you? And now we have a whole group. We're based in Paonia, so mostly based in Paonia at this point, the group that's around, but looking to expand not only the location of our hikes, but our members as well. But the group we have is just like, they've been going on hikes for 4 or 5 years, and it's a great way for new people moving into the area to meet like-minded people and kind of go on a cool hike. So we've got a Huntsman's Ridge workshop, Huntsman's Ridge hike up that trail on McClure Pass this Sunday, if anyone wants to join us. And then on July 24th, we're going to do point-to-point on Kepler Pass from Horse Ranch Park down to Dark Canyon. We'll be in Montrose we've also started leading community hikes this year in different communities around us, and they're really meant to be localized in the community rather than on a trail you might need to drive a mile or a mile and a half to go get to. So Montrose might be the local park or somewhere around there that people can get to. We're leading a backpacking trip on Mendican Ridge, just east of Crawford, on the August 14th through 16th, and then I believe we're doing a plein air painting hike workshop in somewhere around Cedar Edge at the end of August with Cedar Keshet Fowler. So these are all on our website, and if you are interested, we do RSVPs for all these just so we know who's coming and how many people we'll have, but they're all on our website, so please visit that. And I have some information up here as well. And then the other thing we've got going on, we're doing a tree planting project for not this weekend, but next weekend, in collaboration with the National Forest Foundation and the U.S. Forest Service. And it's National Forest Week, so we'll be kind of celebrating that. And we're trying to plant like 4,500 trees or something like that. So that'll be up at Overland Reservoir, just east of Overland Reservoir for 2 days. So we're doing it Saturday and Sunday. And you can join us for an hour or a day or a week. We have plenty of trees if you want to just hang out there and plant trees. We can do that. But so that's really exciting. And again, that'll be on our website if anyone is interested. And then that's all I've got. I do public lands work for a living, so I love talking about it, and I kept it kind of high level. But if anyone has any questions or wants me to go deeper on anything, I'm happy to do so. I've got some membership forms and other information here. And I also have our annual report from last year if you guys want to take one back to your houses and get a more in-depth look at what we do at WSCC. On staff, we have me as Public Lands Program Director. We also have a Watershed Director who does a River Watch program and also does a lot of habitat replacement for ditches that get piped. And also, we're building some trails in and around Paonia and Hotchkiss that he's working on. And then we have an Executive Director, and we have a AmeriCorps Vista who's doing a lot of our communications and outreach work as well. So you can become a member. This is my contact info if anyone needs it. And thank you for listening to me this evening. And yeah.
And today they were talking
So the Yampa is a little bit further out, but I do know, a little bit. I do believe the Gunnison does run year round. I know people that raft it from Pleasure Park to Austin, like Christmas Eve. They have like a Christmas Eve float. And so I do believe they manage it and release water from Blue Mesa through that. So I think that should be okay. In the North Fork, it certainly gets quite low in the summer as farmers pull water out to irrigate their fields. It certainly gets quite low, and I don't think it's managed for fish. I don't think a lot of them, the big ones survive, or they try and make it upriver before, if they have their site or something, before they kind of pull all the water out. But water is certainly an issue. I mean, we're seeing less and less water every year, especially now we're in the third year of a drought, and certainly on everyone's mind. So I think it will continue to be an issue, but we seem to be okay right now. I'm not sure about like LaRue Creek or Surface Creek. I'd have to go and look. You guys probably know better than I do, just living around here. I was up at Gray Reservoir up on LaRue Creek last weekend, and it did seem like there was some water there. So, but again, I don't know really how it's spread out or who manages that. So, yeah.
What are the general rules regarding dispersed camping on the public lands out here? I know that in general there's a stage 1 fire ban, so you can't build a fire.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, where can you camp? How?
Yeah, so you can, areas that are open to dispersed camping, and there are some that aren't, especially, looking over at Crescent Butte, this year in particular,
Okay.
they limited all dispersed camping in all major valleys going out from Crescent Butte to like a reservation system,
Okay.
Just because there's so much damage happening and so many people trying to camp.
Uh-huh.
Around here, most national forests and most BLM land, you can disperse camp. I try not to, and would recommend not like creating new roads or anything like that. Like don't drive kind of in the middle of sage-grouse or sagebrush habitat, stuff like that. But I think if you see an open and kind of already disturbed site off of a Forest Service road, off of a BLM road, I think that's allowable.
Okay.
And again, there can be specific limitations depending on where you're at. I know a lot of national parks don't have any dispersed camping, and it's all campgrounds. So that can hinder you. And I think that goes back to just planning ahead, knowing where you're going, and even like calling the local visitor center and asking. They will usually know. But for around here, Grand Mesa, Gunnison National Forest, you're generally allowed to disperse camp where you would like, assuming you're not gonna really create something new. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question. Speaking of animal waste, horse, they're not required to take horse waste out, are they?
They're not, but they are required to feed them weed-free hay before they, so they're not introducing invasive species. That's another one. I really dislike hiking on a trail with a bunch of horse waste going all the way up. It's not the most fun, but they're not required to pick that up at this time. So.
More of a general question about public lands. So are they in the public trust forever, or does it depend on the agency that manages them? Can they be bought and sold, essentially?
Usually, no.
Okay.
Usually they're, and one of the things we advocate for is that they remain public for future generations. And there are sometimes in specific situations where where people will try and swap land. There's a bill in Utah right now trying to swap I think it's like 100 acres of public land for 100 acres of private land somewhere else, and trying to kind of do the swap there. And usually, I believe that's happening through legislation, so usually it's something along those lines. But there's a lot of private land inholdings in public land. So you'll sometimes run into that where you'll be hiking and there'll be an area of private land that seems to be surrounded by public land. Usually that's when, when the forest was created in National Forest, someone already owned the land in there, so they kept that private. And yeah, so does that kind of answer your question?
That does, and so, then, like that, when cattle graze, are they just leasing it?
Yeah.
Or not? Okay.
Yeah, great question. So the cattle do graze on public land and in wilderness, and again, it gets back to the waste issue. I just like pulling up to a campsite or walking up to a campsite, and there's a bunch of cow manure there, but it's allowed. They do rotate, so and there is usually a person, either the BLM, the Forest Service. I'm actually not sure about Park Service if they do graze there or not. I think in some areas, but there is a person who kind of manages that. So and is keeping track of where the cattle are and where they should be. But yeah, good question. Yeah.
You had mentioned the tribal lands. It was my understanding that those are private. Not considered public.
It really depends on the area itself. Again, Monument Valley, if you've been down there, it's a beautiful area. It is public. You can drive through it and camp in some areas.
Yeah, but it's still owned by the Navajo Nation.
Yeah.
And you have to abide by the laws of the...
Sure, yeah. I mean, the same way you would have to follow the regulations of the Park Service and National Park lands.
So when we hiked the Canyon de Chelly decades ago, we had to get permission from the owners to go down into that private land.
Yeah, so it can be different, and it's good to know and good to acknowledge too that most of our public land that we have is the ancestral homelands for a lot of tribes. So good to just acknowledge that as well.
You mean under the Antiquities Act, were they designated?
Just, this whole area before, white settlers moved in was all, specifically this area was all hunting, I believe all hunting lands.
But I'm talking about the jurisdiction as far as the government. So tribal lands are tribal lands. I'm not talking about the monuments that were created on public lands after the fact, like Bears Ears, but because Monument Valley is Navajo land, even though there's public access.
Yeah.
But it's through the permission of the Navajo people that you can go in there. Okay.
So they pretty much run all the concessions and stuff, don't they? I mean, the areas in there in Monument that...
Yeah, even if you go deep into the reservation, any of them, you'll notice that there's not much paved road, and it's done for a reason. They know that if they pave, it's open range for them. And the minute you start bringing in RVs and people are blasting down the highway on their vacation, and particularly at night, you hit the cattle and the sheep and the horses that are crossing the road. So they deliberately keep it gravel and unpaved so that people don't go there.
It's a matter of respect for what the Native American tribe wants you to do on their public land.
Yeah, it is their land, and they don't consider it public land.
I was getting ready to camp down in Utah this year, helping on and find out, what the conditions were in a specific area. It was fairly close to Chaco. And they said, well, because of the pandemic and that, were really asking people to limit
Chaco is owned by who owns the national monuments? Park Service or a combination of?
Yeah, it can be a
So
number of different.
they own, the US government owns Chaco per
It's
se.
managed by US government.
You're right, but the whole surrounding area is not whole land, it's all private, well, checkerboard, but.
And it's also Department of the Interior, because Navajo lands will also fall.
Right, right.
Into the broad range of interior management.
But that's the big umbrella, right? Department of Interior is all of it.
Well, not
No.
forest.
Yeah,
Forest
that-
is better at.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Forest
Forest
Service.
Service is under the Department of Agriculture, but then
Oh, I didn't know
Park
that.
Service and Fish and Wildlife and BLM are all under Department of Interior.
Huh. Okay, I didn't know that.
Sure.
Surface mining is also under
Mhm.
Well, you pretty much already addressed my question. That was, you showed all the agencies at the beginning, most of which are part of the Department of the Interior, the Forest Service, and part of agriculture. And so my question is, do you think that we as public landowners would be better served if that were under one department? I mean, keeping the agencies kind of their responsibilities as is, but maybe one department overseeing all that.
Yeah,
Is kind of status quo is okay?
it's a good question. I don't know if I have an opinion, but
Oh, you gotta.
it was done the way it was done when, as kind of as things were coming together as forest lands. Forest lands are just managed for multiple use, same as Bureau of Land Management, whereas Park Service is more for use and enjoyment of visitors and recreators. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's an interesting question to see what it would look like kind of all under one agency, but I don't know if it would be better. I don't know if it would be better or
Maybe just one executive
One.
department.
yeah.
Right. I used to work for Congress, okay, so a lot of my bosses were all in interior management, and the Forest Service is managed under the Department of Agriculture, because the forest is intended as watershed, and also when it was founded, it was intended for timber production. So they put it in ag, and everything else went in interior, but at the legislative level, it's all handled as public lands. So there is some mixing when you get into Congress and you're talking about how Congress looks at public lands. Can they put it all together? They have to separate it out in terms of management. But the committees that address issues on the forest and issues in the BLM areas is the same committees. It's just cumbersome to have them in two different departments, cabinet departments, interior and ag. That's the way it is. But the federal land policy management acts apply to management on forest and management on BLM. It isn't any different. You don't say, well, on the forest you can do this, and on BLM you can do that. It just goes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. No, I think that
But that's
know
what
better than I do. Yeah.
So what's the biggest thing? I mean, I think the past year, 2 years have really brought a lot of people out into the parks, into all kinds of areas. And it's all right. A lot of them don't know what they're supposed to be doing, or they don't care. I don't know, both of them. So just a lot more public education.
Yeah, I think so. That's certainly the approach that we're taking is trying to educate as many people as we can, trying to get as many people out who are educated to educate others. So again, now that you guys all have a general understanding, even just pointing people to trailhead kiosks if they're in good shape, some are not, but we're trying to get there as well. Just educating, trying to get people to understand that no one's going to come and clean up after them. That's not what someone on staff at the Park Service or the Forest Service is really meant to do, especially in the backcountry. And that, I found trash from years and years and years when I was a wilderness ranger back in the wilderness. That people just left and thought that someone else was going to can I come pick it up for them? So I think education, yeah. And again, if you're interested, that's, you know, a big push that we're making at WSCC is trying to get people educated and kind of spreading the word of Leave No Trace as our areas get more visitation. Yeah, focus on Kevlar, but certainly looking everywhere as you know, we've seen just a huge rise in visitors over the past year or so.
I brought this up to my state senators, but is there any effort to push into the schools? I was talking specifically about water education, water as a resource. And I remember back in the 50s, which you do not, there was a big push. Once the interstate highway system opened, there was a big push to stop littering the highways. And they started this national litter bug campaign that went into the schools. And they got the highways cleaned up in a very short period of time because people became conscious, not just tossing things out the window. I just wondered if there's organizations such as yours could lobby and advocate for some more focus in the public schools, you know, nationwide, that we have these resources and we need to take care of them.
Yeah, so back about 4 years ago, we were working with a number of groups on this very issue, on getting schools educated, and we're part of the founding members of the Nature Connection, and so we partner with them a lot. We're partnering with them right now on a project, getting kids on like a wilderness trail crew. They also have kids from the Nature Connection doing trail work and building trails outside like Hotchkiss High School, things like that. So there are local groups, and they're based in the Delta County school system. They're kind of a subset of that. So they're certainly working towards getting all this information to kids so that they see it and also experience it, right? If you don't grow up or don't have parents who either know how to recreate responsibly or even go out in the woods, you might not go yourself. So they run a number of camps and day camps and
Well, it'd be
overnight.
nice if it was statewide to the Front Range and all over, and it was a collective attitude as opposed to, I realize you're making efforts, but the trickle-down effect doesn't work. You know, you try and tell the parents tell the kids, but they forget. And then, I mean, we need to have a kind of a collective ownership of the public lands and respect for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You know, just based on our area of interest that we're working on, you know, that's how the Nature Connection was founded, and again, they're a terrific organization. But I agree, it should be more widespread into schools, and just how to, you know, that you need to pick up after yourself and things like that.
Yeah, it's basic principles.
Basic
Leave no
principles,
trace, what does
yeah.
that mean, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank everyone for coming.